I want to start today by looking at a resume.
A resume. Okay, like for a corporate job application.
Exactly. But this isn't just any resume. It's a letter written back in 1482, sent to Ludovico Sforza, who was the Duke of Milan.
Right.
And the applicant is trying to get a job at the court. And it is, well, it's confident, to say the least. It's a 10-point list of everything this guy could do.
Right. And you have to keep the context in mind here. Sforza wasn't just some politician. He was a warlord. I mean, Milan was under constant threat, so you can imagine what skills he was actually shopping for.
Oh, absolutely. Listen to some of these points. Point 1, I have plans for bridges, which are very light and strong and suitable for carrying very easily.
Okay, very practical.
Then point 4, I have also types of cannons, most convenient and easily portable. He talks about armored vehicles, catapults, draining moats, secret tunnels. It reads like a brochure from a modern defense contractor.
It's a military engineer's pitch, 100%.
Yeah.
He is selling destruction, defense, and logistical supremacy. He knows his audience perfectly.
He's not selling beauty. No, he's selling power.
Exactly. He goes on and on about warfare. And then, almost as an afterthought, down at item number 10, and it's a literal footnote, he adds this.
Okay.
In time of peace, I believe I can give perfect satisfaction, and to the equal of any other in architecture, and also in painting, I can do everything possible, as well as any other, whosoever he may be.
As well as any other. That is quite the humble brag.
Can you imagine? The applicant is Leonardo da Vinci, and he lists painting at the very, very bottom, basically saying, oh yeah, and I can also paint if you need that.
It is the ultimate irony, isn't it? The world knows Leonardo da Vinci almost exclusively as the painter of the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper.
Right.
But if you asked Leonardo in 1482 who he was, he wouldn't have said artist. He would have said engineer, inventor.
Yeah.
Military strategist.
That is the central paradox we are digging into today. We are doing a full examination of the life of Leonardo da Vinci. And our mission, really, is to move past that caricature we all have in our heads. You know, the old wise man with the long white beard on the coffee mug. Right, the wizard figure. That image is safe. It's a little boring. And frankly, it's just wrong. It strips away all the struggle and the personality.
Exactly. We want to find the real guy, the illegitimate child, the procrastinator, which honestly makes me feel a lot better about myself. The military engineer and the anatomist who was discovering things about the human body centuries before doctors caught up.
And we have a mountain of source material to help us do that. We're going to be looking at his own notebooks, the famous Codices Plus biographies, art history records from the Louvre and Uffizi, and of course historical accounts of his travels from Tuscany all the way to France.
So let's go back to the very beginning, because usually when we tell the story of a genius, we start with their elite education. But with Leonardo, it's the lack of status that really defines him, right?
It is. It's everything. Leonardo was born on April 15th, 1452, in the town of Vinci, which is just outside Florence. But the key fact of his birth is that he was illegitimate. He was the bastard son of Ser Piero, a very wealthy, successful notary, and a peasant woman named Caterina.
And in 1452, being illegitimate wasn't just a social stigma. It had real legal consequences. You were locked out of a lot of opportunities.
You were. But in Leonardo's case, historians often refer to this as the blessing of illegitimacy.
How can being a second-class citizen be a blessing? That sounds counterintuitive.
Well, look at his father, Ser Piero. He came from a long line of notaries. And a notary in Florence wasn't just a guy who stamped papers. They were the legal backbone of the whole guild system. They drafted contracts, wills, property deeds. It was a rigid, prestigious, and well, a very bureaucratic profession. If Leonardo had been a legitimate son, he would have been expected, forced, really, to join the family business.
So no choice in the matter.
None. He would have been sent to Latin school, trained in law, and spent his life pushing paper in Florence.
So because he was a bastard, the family guild was closed to him. He dodged a bullet.
Precisely. He was free. He didn't have to become a lawyer. He could pursue the arts. He could pursue invention. But this also meant he had a very different education. He famously described himself later in life as an homo sanza letter.
An unlettered man.
An unlettered man.
Which sounds like he couldn't read, but we know he wrote thousands and thousands of pages.
Right. He could read and write Italian, of course, but he had no formal education in Latin or Greek. And we have to remember, in the Renaissance, Latin was the gatekeeper.
The language of the educated class.
Completely. If you didn't know Latin, you were cut off from the traditional sources of knowledge. The ancient texts, the classics, the Bible in its scholarly form. All the serious academic work was done in Latin.
So while other scholars were reading Aristotle to find out how the world worked, Leonardo was left to his own devices.
He had to look at the world itself. He was forced to learn through direct observation of nature. He didn't read about how a bird flies, he watched the bird. He didn't read a text about how water flows, he sat by the river and sketched the eddies.
And that became his whole philosophy.
It became his superpower. He called himself a disciple of experience. He wasn't burdened by what the ancients said was true. He only cared about what he could see and prove for himself.
There's this famous story, or maybe it's more of a memory, that he wrote down in his notebooks about his childhood.
Yeah.
The kite story.
Yes, the kite. And just to clarify for everyone listening, in this context, a kite is a type of bird of prey, a hawk-like bird, not a toy on a string.
Right. Good clarification.
Leonardo reported this memory where he's an infant just lying in his cradle, and a kite flies down, opens his mouth with its tail, and strikes him on the lips several times.
That sounds terrifying, and also like a very vivid dream.
Sigmund Freud had a field day with that one. He wrote an entire book analyzing that single memory, as you can imagine.
Yes, he did.
He read a lot into it about Leonardo's relationship with his mother, his sexuality, but whether it was a real memory or a fantasy, it shows how early his connection to nature and especially to birds began. He wasn't raised primarily by his stiff professional father in the city. He spent his early years in the countryside with his uncle, Francesco.
And Uncle Francesco was the distinct opposite of the father. Right.
Completely.
Right.
Francesco was a bit of a drifter and nature lover. He didn't care about money or status. He was the one who encouraged Leonardo. He was the one who said, hey, look at that lizard, look at that glowworm.
So he nurtured that curiosity.
He and Leonardo's grandfather, Antonio, they encouraged that idle observation. They let him roam the hills of Tuscany. That's where he learned to see, not just to look, but to truly see.
So he's roaming the hills, sketching, observing. But eventually, his dad, Ser Piero, realizes, okay, this kid has some real talent, and I need to do something with him. So around 1466, he moves the boy to Florence.
Right. He's about 14 or 15 years old by this point. And Ser Piero uses his connections to get Leonardo an apprenticeship. But he doesn't just put him anywhere. He gets him into the studio of Andrea del Verrocchio.
Now, I think when most of us hear art studio, we picture a quiet room with a guy in a beret painting a fruit bowl.
Yeah, right.
But Verrocchio's place wasn't like that at all, was it?
Not at all. Verrocchio's workshop was a factory. It was a polytechnic lab. Verrocchio was a sculptor, a painter, a goldsmith, and an engineer. You know the massive copper ball on top of the Duomo in Florence? The one that sits on top of Brunellesi's dome?
Yeah, it's huge. It's iconic. You can't miss it.
Verrocchio's shop built that. And that required massive engineering, hoisting mechanisms, complex soldering. It was an industrial project. Other famous artists like Botticelli and Perugino were also in that workshop. It was the place to be.
So Leonardo isn't just learning to mix colors.
No. He's learning metallurgy. He's learning the chemistry of pigments. He's learning mechanics to move heavy statues. He's doing plaster casting. And crucially, they are doing dissection to understand musculature for sculpture and painting.
Wow.
It was the perfect playground for a mind like Leonardo's because it blurred the lines between art and engineering. He saw that to paint the human form, you had to understand the mechanics underneath the skin.
And art in this period was a team sport.
Mm-hmm.
We had this idea of the lone genius, but in these workshops, the master would design the piece, and then the apprentices would fill in the details, the background, the robes, maybe some of the minor figures.
Which brings us to the moment where the student surpasses the master, the baptism of Christ.
This is the famous turning point. Paint the scene for us.
So Verrocchio is painting this scene of John the Baptist baptizing Jesus. It's a standard commission for the time. He assigns Leonardo, who is now roughly 23, to paint the angel on the far left and parts of the landscape in the background.
And when you look at this painting today, it's in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, you can literally see the difference. It's not subtle. It looks like two different realities have collided on one panel.
It's jarring. Verrocchio used tempera paint, which is egg-based. It dries very fast. It's a bit flat, a bit matte. Leonardo, on the other hand, used oil paints, which were still new to Italy. They were a technique coming down from the Netherlands.
And oils let you do more.
So much more. He could build up layers of glaze. His angel has this glowing, translucent skin. The hair looks like real flowing hair catching the light in individual strands. Next to it, Verrocchio's figures look, stiff and cartoony.
And isn't there a legend that Vasari tells, the great art historian?
Yeah.
That Verrocchio looked at Leonardo's angel, looked at his own work, and just put down his brush.
The story goes that Verrocchio was so humbled that a boy knew more than he did that he vowed never to paint again. Now, historically, Verrocchio did focus mostly on sculpture after that, so there might be a kernel of truth to it. But it symbolizes that moment where the Renaissance shifted gears. Leonardo brought a realism and a depth, an atmospheric quality that just hadn't existed before him.
But it wasn't all triumphs in surpassing the master in Florence. We have to talk about 1476, the legal trouble.
Yes. This is a crucial and probably very traumatic part of his story. It's a reminder of how precarious life could be.
So what happened?
In 1476, an anonymous accusation was dropped into one of the tamboris. These were wooden boxes around Florence where you could secretly report crimes, kind of like a medieval tip line.
Anonymous. That's never good.
No. And the note accused Leonardo and 3 other young men of sodomy with a known male prostitute named Jacopo Saltarelli.
And we need to be clear, sodomy was a capital offense.
Theoretically, yes. It was punishable by death or exile. Leonardo was arrested. He was imprisoned for a time. He was publicly humiliated. The charges were eventually dismissed because it was an anonymous tip and there were no witnesses to testify.
But the damage was done.
Absolutely. Do you think this influenced his personality? Because later in life, he's known for being very secretive, writing in code.
It's very likely. I mean, it must have taught him that his private life could be weaponized, that it could be used to destroy him. He became much more guarded after this, and it's probably no coincidence that shortly after this incident, he starts looking for a way out of Florence. He needs a change of scenery.
He needs a patron who is more powerful, who can offer him protection. He needs to escape the gossip and the committees of Florence.
Which brings us back to that resume we started with. He sets his sights on Milan.
Right. Florence was a republic, full of infighting and fierce competition. Milan was a duchy, ruled by a single authoritarian prince, Ludovico Sforza. Leonardo must have thought, if I can get in with the Duke, I'll have protection and a steady paycheck.
So he packs up, and I love this detail. When he arrives in Milan, he brings a gift for the Duke, a gift from the Medicis in Florence. But it's not a painting.
No, not at all. It was a silver lyre, a musical instrument that he had designed and crafted himself, and it was shaped like a horse's skull.
A horse's skull. That's metal.
Literally and figuratively. Leonardo was an incredible musician. Vasari says he sang divinely and could improvise on the lyre. So he shows up in Milan not just as an engineer or an artist, but as a performer. He was the ultimate courtier, the complete package.
So he gets the job, he's in Milan, and he starts working on what was supposed to be his masterpiece. Not a painting, but a giant statue. The Gran Cavalla.
The Great Horse! This was Sforza's big ego project. He wanted the largest equestrian statue in the world to honor his father, Francesco Sforza, a massive bronze horse.
And how big are we talking here?
Just enormous.
Yeah.
Leonardo designed a horse that would have been 24 feet high. It required something like 70 or 80 tons of bronze to cast.
And Leonardo, being Leonardo, didn't just sculpt it. He spent years and years planning how to cast it in one single piece.
This is where the engineer completely takes over from the artist. Casting a statue that size in one piece was chemically and physically almost impossible at the time. He had to invent new techniques. He designed new furnaces. He spent months in the ducal stables studying the anatomy of horses to get the musculature perfect.
And he built a model.
A full-scale clay model. It was unveiled to the public in Milan, and people were just awestruck. They called it the 8th wonder of the world. It was his obsession for years.
You don't have it today. It's not in Milan.
No. And this is one of the great tragedies of art history, one of his great failures. Leonardo was finally ready to cast it. The bronze was all collected. But then war broke out. The French were threatening to invade Milan.
And you can't fight a war with a statue.
Ludovico Sforza, in a desperate move, took those 66 tons of bronze intended for the art and sent them to the weaponsmiths to be melted down into cannons.
That must have broken Leonardo's heart.
He wrote this tiny, sad note in his journal. The Duke has lost his state and his possessions, and of the horse, nothing will be done. And to add insult to injury, when the French archers eventually invaded Milan, they used the massive clay model of the horse for target practice. They just shot it to pieces.
Ouch. That is just painful to even think about. But while the horse failed, he did leave something else in Milan that has survived, more or less. A painting on a dining room wall. The Last Supper.
1495 to 1498, in the refectory of Santa Maria delle Grazie. And this is arguably the most famous religious painting in history.
But let's look at it with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
Before Leonardo, how was the Last Supper usually painted? What was the standard?
It was usually very static, very symbolic. A row of people sitting at a table, looking pious, maybe a bit bored. Judas was almost always placed on the opposite side of the table to single him out.
So you knew who the bad guy was.
Exactly. Leonardo decided to paint a specific psychological moment. He chose the moment from the Gospel of John where Jesus says, "Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me."
So it's a reaction shot, an emotional bombshell.
It's an explosion of emotion. It's chaos. You see shock, anger, denial, confusion. He groups the disciples in threes, creating this wave of motion and gesture that spreads out from the calm center, which is Jesus.
And the composition of Judas is brilliant.
It's revolutionary. Instead of putting Judas on the other side of the table, Leonardo puts him with the others, but casts him in shadow. He's the only one recoiling, pulling back from Jesus, clutching his little bag of silver. It's a psychological identification, not just a spatial one. He's isolated by his own guilt, not by his seat at the table.
But sticking to our theme of the imperfect genius, there was a technical problem with this painting too, wasn't there?
A massive one. A fatal one, really. Leonardo hated fresco.
Explain that for us. Why did he hate it so much?
True fresco means painting on wet plaster. The chemical reaction as the plaster dries binds the pigment to the wall itself. It's incredibly durable, but you have to work fast. You have to finish a section, a giornata, before the plaster dries that day.
Not good for a procrastinator.
Leonardo was a slow, methodical painter. He liked to stare at the wall for hours, make one brushstroke, and then go away for the afternoon. He wanted to layer paints, to modify them, to change his mind. Fresco was completely the wrong medium for his personality.
So he invented his own method.
He did. He tried to treat the stone wall like a wooden panel. He sealed it with a layer of pitch and gesso, and then painted on top with his own mix of oil and tempera on the dry surface.
Which sounds innovative.
It was disastrous. The moisture from the wall couldn't escape. The paint never properly bonded. Within 20 years, while Leonardo was still alive, it started flaking off the wall. It's a miracle we have anything left of it today. It's been crumbling for 500 years. It was a masterpiece of art, but a complete failure of engineering.
While he's in Milan, we also have to talk about his personal life. Or, specifically, his companion, Salai.
Ah, yes. Gian Giacomo Caproti, but Leonardo nicknamed him Salai. The nickname means the little devil.
And he joined Leonardo's household when he was just a kid, right? Around 10 years old.
Yes, in 1490. And he lived up to the nickname from day one. Leonardo actually lists Salai's crimes in his notebook like it's a grocery list.
What kind of things did he do?
Thief, liar, obstinate, glutton. The kid stole money, he stole a silver stylus, he sold clothes Leonardo bought for him. Just a total troublemaker.
But Leonardo kept him around for 30 years.
He adored him. He bought him expensive clothes, pink stockings with velvet trim. Salai was apparently incredibly beautiful with these golden curls that Leonardo loved to draw over and over again.
And the relationship was probably more than just master and apprentice.
Most historians agree they were likely lovers, or at the very least that Salai was the great complicated love of Leonardo's life. He's probably the model for some of his later paintings, like St. John the Baptist, and some people even speculate his features influenced the face of the Mona Lisa.
It had such a human layer to him. He wasn't this ascetic monk living for his work. He was a guy putting up with a chaotic, thieving boyfriend because he was in love. Now, we have the art, we have the drama, but we can't do a deep dive on Leonardo without opening the notebooks.
The codices, yes. This is where we see the mind on paper. This is the real Leonardo.
First off, the writing itself is strange. The mirror script.
Right. He wrote everything from right to left. If you want to read his notes, you have to hold them up to a mirror.
So, was this a code? Was he trying to hide his secrets from the church or from rivals?
Oh.
The whole Da Vinci Code idea.
People love that theory, but the simplest explanation is probably the best one. He was left-handed.
Ah.
In those days, you're using a quill and ink. If you write left to right with your left hand, your hand drags across the wet ink and smudges it. Writing backwards, from right to left, keeps your hand clean.
So it was just practicality over conspiracy. I like it.
Yeah.
But the contents. Let's talk anatomy, because this stuff just blows my mind. He wasn't just drawing muscles for his art. He was doing groundbreaking science.
He dissected over 30 bodies in his lifetime. And you have to remember the conditions. There's no refrigeration. He's working with rotting human and animal corpses, often at night, by candlelight in the bowels of hospitals or veterinary schools. It was gruesome, smelly, dangerous work.
And he found things that medicine wouldn't confirm for centuries.
The heart is the best example. At the time, the prevailing galenic theory was that the heart's main function was to warm the blood like a little furnace.
Which is Not right.
Not right at all. Leonardo, through his dissections, realized it was a muscle, a powerful pump. He was the first to correctly map the 4 chambers of the heart.
And the aortic valve, right. That story is amazing.
It's unbelievable. He wanted to understand how the aortic valve worked, how it closed so perfectly, so he built a glass model of the aorta and pumped water mixed with grass seeds through it to see the flow.
He created a physical model to test his hypothesis.
Yes. And he discovered that the blood doesn't just slam the valve shut. It creates these little vortices, swirls in a sinus behind the valve flaps that gently push the valve closed from the side. Medical science didn't fully understand and confirm that mechanism until the 1960s with the advent of MRI technology.
He was literally 450 years ahead of schedule.
Easily. He drew the fetus in the womb, the first accurate depiction in history, showing the umbilical cord and the correct positioning. He drew the spine with the correct S-shaped curvature. If he had published these notebooks, he would have revolutionized medicine. But he didn't. He kept them all in his trunk.
And then there's the Vitruvian Man, that famous drawing of the guy in the circle and the square. It's on T-shirts. It's everywhere.
And it's often misunderstood. It's not just a drawing of a naked guy. It is the synthesis of everything Leonardo believed. It's art, it's anatomy, and it's geometry, all in one.
So what's he showing?
He's illustrating an idea from the ancient Roman architect Vitruvius that the human body is a model of perfect proportions. And he's showing that the human form fits perfectly into the 2 most perfect shapes. The circle, which represented the divine, the cosmic, and the square, which represented the earthly, the material.
So man is the bridge between heaven and earth.
Exactly. It's the idea that man is a microcosm of the entire universe. All the principles of nature can be found within us.
We also have to touch on the inventions, the fun stuff.
Yeah.
The tank, the helicopter, all of that.
The ornithopter. Leonardo was completely obsessed with flight. He would buy birds in the market just to release them and watch how they took off. He filled notebooks with studies on aerodynamics and wing structures.
He realized later that humans don't have the chest muscles to flap wings like a bird, right?
Yeah.
That was the big problem.
Eventually, yes, he understood that human muscle power wasn't enough for lift. But before that, he designed these incredible machines, the aerial screw, which looks for all the world like a modern helicopter.
And the tank.
Yeah.
The armored car.
Yes, the turtle tank. A cone-shaped vehicle covered in metal plates, with cannons sticking out all around it. It was meant to be propelled by men inside, turning cranks.
I read somewhere that the tank design had a deliberate flaw in it.
It did.
Yeah.
The gears for the cranks were drawn in a way that if you built it exactly like the diagram, the wheels would turn in opposite directions. The tank would have immobilized itself.
Was that a mistake from Leonardo?
Very unlikely. Leonardo was a perfectionist. Many historians think it was a deliberate sabotage, a form of copyright protection. He was paranoid about his ideas being stolen. So if the plans fell into enemy hands, they'd build a tank that couldn't move.
That is sneaky and brilliant.
Yeah.
So moving on in his life, 1499, the French invade Milan, Sforza falls, Leonardo has to run.
He enters what historians call his wandering years, and this is where the story gets really gritty. In 1502, he ends up working for Cesare Borgia.
The Cesare Borgia, son of the Pope, Alexander VI, the inspiration for Machiavelli's The Prince, the guy who murdered his own brother allegedly.
The very same, the most ruthless and feared man in Italy. And for about a year, Leonardo becomes his architect and general engineer. He's traveling with Borgia's army as it carves a bloody path through central Italy.
What did he do for a warlord like that? Build better weapons?
He mainly made maps, specifically the map of Imola. You have to visualize this. Maps back then were mostly symbolic, pretty pictures of hills and castles, usually drawn from a side-on hill perspective, not very useful for strategy.
Right.
Leonardo created a map that looks like a satellite image, a perfect top-down plan.
But how? He didn't have a satellite. Or a drone.
He used an odometer. He probably designed himself to measure distances and a magnetic compass to measure angles from a central point.
Yeah.
And then he used geometry and trigonometry to create what's called an iconographic map, a flat overhead view. It allowed Borgia to see every street, every house, every defensive point of the city. It transformed cartography from art into military data.
And while he's there, he meets another heavy hitter of the era, Niccolo Machiavelli.
Yes. The 3 of them, the brutal warlord Borgia, the cynical political theorist Machiavelli, and the universal genius Leonardo were all in Imola at the same time. Imagine the dinner conversation.
Unbelievable.
Machiavelli and Leonardo actually collaborated later in Florence on this wild scheme to divert the entire Arno River.
To divert the whole river, why?
To cut off the water supply to the rival city of Pisa, which Florence was at war with. They wanted to literally move the river to win a war. Leonardo did all the engineering plans. The project ultimately failed. The ditch diggers didn't follow his precise instructions, but the scale of the ambition is just terrifying.
During this time, back in Florence around 1503, he starts a small portrait of a silk merchant's wife, a woman named Lisa Gherardini.
The Mona Lisa.
We have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Why is this the most famous painting in the world? I mean, is it just hype at this point?
It's not just hype, it's the technique. It's one word. Sfumato.
Which means smoke.
Yes, smoky. Leonardo realized that in nature, there are no hard lines. We don't have a black outline around our faces. Light and shadow blend into each other. So he painted with these tiny, almost microscopic layers of colored glaze, some of them only a couple of molecules thick. He blurred all the edges, especially the corners of her eyes and mouth.
Which is what creates that famous smile.
The unstable smile. And this is pure optical science. If you look at her mouth directly with your full field vision, which is what sees sharp detail, she looks serious. The smile isn't really there. But if you look at her eyes, your peripheral vision, which is better at picking up shadows and contrast, picks up the blurred shadows at the corners of her mouth, and your brain interprets it as a smile.
So she literally smiles when you aren't looking directly at her mouth.
Exactly. She flickers. She feels alive because her expression changes as you look at her. It's a psychological trick played with paint.
And he never gave it to the client, did he?
No. Francesco del Giocondo, her husband, never got his painting. Leonardo kept it. He packed it in his luggage and took it everywhere he moved for the next 16 years of his life. He was still adding tiny, imperceptible brush strokes to it right up until he died. It was his personal obsession.
So he's working on the Mona Lisa, but he's also in a feud. A very public rivalry with the new kid on the block in Florence, Michelangelo.
This is one of the great beefs of art history. You could not have two more different people. You have Leonardo, older, handsome, urbane, wears elegant pink tunics, smells like rosewater, surrounded by his beautiful assistants.
Okay.
And then you have Michelangelo. Young, gruff, solitary, covered in marble dust, notoriously unkempt, probably didn't bathe very often.
They hated each other.
Viscerally. There's a famous story where Leonardo is walking through the square in Florence and some gentlemen ask him to interpret a passage from the poet Dante. Michelangelo happens to be passing by, and Leonardo, trying to be polite, says, "Ask Michelangelo, he will expound it for you."
And Michelangelo did not take that well.
He exploded. He thought Leonardo was mocking him. He shouted back, "Explain it yourself. You who made a model of a horse and couldn't cast it in bronze and so gave it up in shame."
Oh, that's a low blow, bringing up the failed horse.
It was the most brutal thing you could say to him. And Leonardo, who himself had critiqued Michelangelo's muscular figures, he said they look like sacks of walnuts, just stood there, turned red, and said nothing. It really shows how much that failure with the horse still hurt him.
They even had a paint-off, didn't they? In the Hall of 500 in Florence.
They did. The Florentine government commissioned them both to paint massive battle scenes on opposite walls of the council hall. The Battle of Anghiari for Leonardo and the Battle of Cassina for Michelangelo. It was a public showdown.
And Leonardo tried another one of his technical experiments.
He never learned. He tried this ancient Roman technique of encaustic painting, using an oil and wax mixture to paint on the wall. He then brought in braziers, lit fires to try and bake the paint onto the wall. The heat was too intense at the top and too weak at the bottom. The paint at the top of the mural began to melt. It just dripped down the wall. He abandoned it. Another unfinished masterpiece.
It seems like a pattern. He solves the intellectual problem in his head, he starts the work, gets bored, or hits a technical snag and just moves on.
"Tell me if anything was ever done," he wrote in his notebook over and over. He was plagued by this feeling that he hadn't finished enough, that his potential was unfulfilled.
So let's go to the final act of his life. 1513, he goes to Rome.
He's hoping for glory. The Pope is Leo X, a Medici from Florence, but Rome is dominated by a younger generation. Raphael is painting the papal apartments. Michelangelo is finishing the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Leonardo is seen as, well, as the old man, yesterday's news.
And he gets in trouble again, doesn't he?
Witchcraft accusations. He was dissecting bodies at the hospital of Santo Spirito. The Pope found out. He was probably tipped off by a German rival who was jealous and banned Leonardo from doing any more anatomical dissections. This devastated him. He was cut off from his scientific work.
He needed a rescue, and he got one. From the King of France.
From King Francis I. A young, tall, ambitious king who absolutely worshipped the Italian Renaissance, and Leonardo in particular. He invited Leonardo to come to Amboise in France in 1516.
And he gave him a pretty good title, too.
The best title. First painter, engineer, and architect to the king. And he gave him a beautiful manor house, the Château du Clos-Lucé, just down the road from the royal castle.
And the best part, the king didn't ask him to paint anything specific. He didn't commission anything.
No, the king just wanted his company. He called Leonardo mon père, my father. He would just walk over. Tradition says there was an underground tunnel connecting their houses and just sit and talk with Leonardo for hours about philosophy and science and art. It was the perfect retirement. He was finally being paid just to be Leonardo.
He did work on a few final things there. His last painting, St. John the Baptist.
His last painting, and it's a haunting one. It's St. John emerging from this deep, impenetrable darkness. He has that same enigmatic smile as the Mona Lisa, and he's pointing his finger up to heaven. And he's very androgynous, soft flesh, long curls. It's almost like Leonardo, at the end of his life, is blending male and female, human and divine, into one final mysterious figure.
But his health was failing.
He likely had a stroke around 1517. It paralyzed his right hand.
But he was left-handed.
Exactly. That's the luck of the draw. So he could still draw and write, but his general health was in decline. He spent his last days with his students, trying to organize his thousands of pages of notebooks, trying to put his life's work in order.
And then, May 2, 1519, Leonardo da Vinci dies at age 67.
There is that famous, very romantic painting by Ingres of Leonardo dying in the arms of King Francis I. It's a beautiful image.
But is it true?
Almost certainly not. Royal records show the king was a 2-day journey away at a different chateau when Leonardo died. But, symbolically, it's true. He died in the intellectual embrace of a king who finally understood his value beyond just what he could produce.
Let's talk about his will, because wills tell you a lot about a person.
They do. And Leonardo's will is fascinating. He requested that 60 beggars follow his coffin in the funeral procession, each one carrying a large taper, a candle.
60 beggars. Why?
He was paying them for their service. He wanted to give back to the poorest of the poor. It was this final grand act of charity from a man who had known both poverty and wealth.
And his stuff, the notebooks, the paintings.
He left his artistic tools, his instruments, and all the notebooks to his most faithful aristocratic student, Francesco Melzi. And thank goodness he did, because Melzi preserved them. If he hadn't, we wouldn't know half of what we know about Leonardo's mind.
And what about Salai, the little devil?
Even after everything, he left Salai half of his vineyard in Milan. Salai eventually returned to Milan and died in a duel or a crossbow fight a few years later, a fittingly dramatic end.
So what does this all mean? When we look back at that resume, the failed horse, the crumbling Last Supper, the unfinished battle scenes, and the secret notebooks, what's the takeaway?
It means that Leonardo wasn't a magician. He wasn't a wizard. He was human. His legacy isn't just the few finished products. It's the process. It's the thousands of pages of questions. He showed us that art and science aren't separate disciplines. They come from the same source.
Which is?
Curiosity. He showed us that the same curiosity that makes you want to paint a beautiful angel is the same curiosity that makes you want to dissect a human heart to see how it works.
You saw everything as connected.
Everything. The flow of water in a river, the curl of a human hair, the flight of a bird, the spiral of a seashell. It was all one big, beautiful, interconnected system. His perfectionism and his distraction weren't failures. They were symptoms of a mind that just sought too much to ever capture it all.
That is a beautiful way to put it. He left us with the legacy of the unfinished, which in a way forces us to keep looking, to keep asking questions ourselves.
Precisely. His questions are as important as his answers.
Now, before we go, I have a question for you listening at home or in your car or wherever you are. We talked about how Leonardo locked his notebooks away. Here's the question. If Leonardo had published his notebooks in his lifetime, the anatomy, the geology, the mechanics, how much sooner do you think the scientific revolution would have happened? Would we be 200, 300 years more advanced today?
That is a staggering thought. It really is.
Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the mind of the original Renaissance man, please make sure to like and subscribe to the History Titans channel. It really helps us keep making content like this.
There is always more to learn.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next deep dive.